A Death in the Family by Robin Graves.
Okay. Yeah. Well, can't you just turn it on, let it go?
This
Okay, we're gonna let it
this
go,
is
right?
in
Take out
response
what you
to
want.
the
The
Nicholas
rest goes
Shrek
away.
show that aired on Facebook and YouTube on what we called Devil's Night,
You should get a job making people nervous.
November, October 30th, which it was previously released, but on Devil's Night it was released on YouTube and Facebook. So today is, how do they say it? La Dio de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And it's not October anymore. Noviembre. Watch TV and drink your beer. The man has such insight. So, and before I get into that Nicholas Shrek show, which was called, by the way, it was called The Death, Funeral, and Desecration of Charles Manson, with special guest Michael Bruner, Manson's son, Black Wolf, Manson's friend, and a Tony Spiro, a guest at the funeral on Radio Berlin. So, paranoid truths and lies. These are some of the things that, let me introduce myself first, by the way. As I said, by Robin Graves. I'm Robin Graves, which is the paranoid truth. Is it a lie? It's a pseudonym. So, no, it's not my true name. Kind of leads to there's a little conciliation, which concealing something can be perceived as a lie. Also, when you withhold truths that you know of. So, to be clear, the reason for the pseudonym is I have this great love for a man who is, well, let me put it this way. When I was 3 years old, there's two things I remember from 3 years old. I remember the moon landing, and I remember my dad bitching about Nixon and Nixon's lies. And my father was a beatnik, by the way, and my father also was a Charlie. My grandfather was a Charles. And my father's twin, who I call my double dad. These guys, they were beatniks. They were born 1 year before Charlie, the actual Charlie who we're talking about. 1933. And both of their middle names were after their grandfather. That's why I say there's Charlie, Charlie, Charlie. Also a nephew named Charlie. So, it's a powerful family name. And as I said, this is A Death in the Family by Robin Graves. So, who is Robin Graves? What is Robin Graves? You grow up and you see so many lies that you get to a point where it seems like everything you know probably isn't true. From our public schools, what's taught isn't what really is. Like, we didn't discover America. We came and raped and pillaged America, the natives of America. That's just like a simple truth. And then I mentioned the moon landing, watching the moon landing. You grew up and you believe this, you saw this. Everybody saw it from that time, and you think, this is what happened. And then all of a sudden you start seeing other things that start making kind of sense. When they say we didn't land on the moon, or the moon landing was filmed by, what's his face, the Shining guy, Kubrick. And you wonder, well, maybe that was filmed, because why would we show live? If you really think about it, why would we have a live showing of the moon landing for Russia to watch and see our techniques, our equipment, our science, our abilities, our discoveries? We wouldn't have shared that. But it was a real political victory to manipulate the public, to worldwide, to make everyone in the world think, how impressive what we've done. They must be the leaders. So there's some of the lies, but everything. There's so much history that is written by the winners. So you don't really get to hear the stories of what's really what. And who really knows? Anyways. Let me get a smoke here. So you've seen one vice, and now you see two vices. Watch TV and drink your beer. Anyways, this is about death. I'm stirred by everything that was said on this show, and we'll go over this soon. But first, I want to tell you a little story about the death of my mother, the death of my father, and about their ashes, and how that went. Because, everybody knows that when people die in a family, because this is all about family love. A death in the family is about what happens with the family love. Where does it go? What's it do? So I had a couple sisters, 2 sisters older than me, biologicals. And I was the youngest when my mother died. By the way, and this isn't said disrespectfully, but my mother was a witch, and my father was my double dads were somewhat of Christian mystics, following the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg. So Mom had told me that when she dies, she wants me to take her ashes, drop them from a plane that I'm flying over the farm where she grew up on. She told me this. I was the one who was with her during the end of her life. But I happened to be in jail when she did die in '99, and my sisters handled the death. So I get out, and I hear this story that my middle sister is going to entomb my mother's ashes into the wall of her Catholic church, which my mother wasn't Catholic, so that struck me really odd. And also, my mother had told me what she wanted done with her ashes. So I said, "You better not do that, because I'll have to break into the church and tear the ashes out of the wall and do what I promised her." It was a death wish, and you don't ignore a death wish. Fast forward 7 years later, from 1999, my eldest sister stopped by, and she gave me one third of my mother's ashes, to the chagrin of my middle sister, who felt that I desecrated my mother by dividing her. She felt that our eldest sister desecrated our mother's body by dividing her ashes. So this is her religious belief. This is her custom. But let me show you something. Here they are. This is mom. This is my mom. You see? That's one third of my mom. It's pretty cool too because there's like a little, you see that round thing? Let me see. I don't know, the camera's not real. There it is. You see that? That's some type of medical device that was inside my mother. God rest her soul. You can see all kinds of other things, you know, bits of bones and ashes. Years after this, when my father died, his body by my middle sister was donated for medical studies to Wayne State University because my father had multiple sclerosis. He was 83 years old, same age as Charlie when Charlie died, and they wanted to study his bed sword, racked, atrophied muscles, organs. And after that was completed, she also took the whole inheritance, his whole inheritance, he put it into a scholarship fund for musicians at Wayne State University, which my father was a graduate of, and my double dad, my father's twin brother, who was Anthony. My father was James Charles and Anthony Charles, sons of Charles, born in Crete. So my point is, everybody with families knows that shit gets really crazy when a loved one dies, and everyone has their ideas about how it should be handled, what should be done, who should be in charge, what would be inappropriate, what's appropriate, and whose rituals, whose traditions. Do you put a body in a box and bury it underground? Do you put it on a boat and set it on fire and send it out to sea? Do you burn it on a pyre? All the different things we can do, you know? So, let's get into this. Oh, the ego. The ego is a too much thing. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, who am I? Who am I to have anything to say? I'm Robin Graves. Why I picked that name? Why I picked that pseudonym? Because I had an objective to reach Charlie. And being an ex-convict, having 15 years served in prisons under my belt, being a supposed state-certified, chronic, undifferentiated schizophrenic, I know the paranoid truth. I know what's really going on. So I watched his show and touch on a few pieces here. Somewhere around 5 minutes in. Not only Nicholas Schreck, but there's been many others. Stoner Van Houten or Bruce Fox, to mention one, who are obsessed with wanting Jason Freeman's DNA to prove he's Charles Manson's grandson. In other words, they're questioning the honor of Jason's mother, who told him and who gave him his birth certificate with Charles Manson Jr. as his father. And he grew up with these things, with this stigma that most people can't bear the weight of. This is what I mean about the paranoid truth. There's most people who approach Charles Manson's subject would be sort of crazy to use their real name, because soon after doing that, because you can ask all the ones who have used their real names, all the Schrecks, all the Freemans, all the Tony Spiros and Black Wolves, and Michael Bruners. I don't know so much about him because he stayed in the shadows, but I'm sure he's aware that when you use your real name and associate your concern or care about Charles Manson, you get death threats. You get looked at like you're crazy. You might even be you might be assaulted in any different ways, all kinds of different ways. There's so many people that are still even out there, even though it's 50 years later. Can't imagine what it would have been like, say 5 years after the initial incarceration for the people who stayed in touch. But there is a courage in approaching the subject. So Bruner spoke a little bit about it on the show, on the Nicholas Schreck show, The Death, Funeral, and Desecration. So they start with this, they want his DNA.
I'm trying to stretch it out, make it,
What
the word sound seems like a song.
makes they're very fervent about it, and it's a demand that somehow the people out there believe needs to or has to be met. But these people who are asking it, what business is Jason Freeman's DNA to anybody? Is it even business to the courts? He's proved what he needed to prove. It's the documentation is obviously legitimate, and he doesn't have to prove anymore. He's done enough.
Some advice I really want.
Around 6 minutes into the video, Schreck says, "We will later address why M, meaning Manson, did not allow Freeman visiting privileges. Yeah, how he, by the producers of the show, of Jason's show, contacted him and asked him to have Charlie put him on his visiting list." Yeah, the producer probably wanted that to happen and was trying to make it happen for Jason, who wanted it to happen. And his journey
conscience expander to expand conscience.
Okay. Oh, let me back up a bit. Freeman's DNA. If you people out there who really want, Jason's DNA, I have some. I have it. And if you want ashes, too bad. You got some of those too. Have some ashes and some bone, as do many others who all are doing whatever they do. Is it a desecration that all is it all of them? Are they all wrong? Every single person who has a handful, or is like one person right who has a handful of these ashes? Were they given by Jason or were they stolen? That would be how to answer that question of the legitimacy or propriety of who got ashes or where ashes went. It's just all such a bunch of nonsense because it's someone else's family. It's not your family. Maybe it's your extended family. Maybe that because the man's philosophies, as far as family, how that plays into the whole Manson matrix. So this later addressing why Freeman wasn't allowed. I listened to this whole 3-hour show on Halloween, And like I say, here it is, the Day of the Dead. And it's only been 24 hours, but after hearing the whole show, I don't recall ever hearing him specify uh, why. Yet he might have. Doesn't matter to me anyways, because I know a lot of this background. Like, for example, I myself am a good friend of Charles Manson. We spoke on the phone, we spoke in the mail, correspondences, and I was also asking him to put Jason on his visiting list. What came of that, where that went, was on the one hand, Charlie warned him not to. He told him, you don't want to come be a part of this. If you get in this, you're a family man, you're going to have a lot of problems to deal with. Like, the curse, Manson's curse, right? So Jason's said this before, and his nose has been rubbed in it. But I'm sure Bruner, his uncle, I'm sure can understand what that means. He speaks on it. You can see the great regret that he has in not basically doing what Jason succeeded in doing. Thus far. Jason didn't get a visit, but he did get to have a relationship in phone calls, in correspondence, in love from his grandfather. And he had two choices. The grandfather said to Jason, he advised against it, but if he said if Jason was adamant and insistent and all in, if he once the bond, because it's a big thing, bond with Charlie is BOND, be one not divided. To be one not divided, you come together instead of being all apart. So you have this whole community who know these things. All these guys, they all know it, but the whole community is apart. It's all divided. There's this camp against that camp, and the love's all gone as soon as the old man died. Oh, yeah. Well, the second thing was Jason was offered by Charlie if Jason would commit to all in and move right next to the prison, which if you follow the subject matter, I'm sure you know that many of Charlie's loyal family and friends moved by as close as they could to the prison to be with him, to care for him, to visit. And Charlie offered Jason $50,000 to move out there, but he advised against it. So this is the thing that you didn't know, Shrek, the guru that you are. And I don't know, there's such hypocrisy in the show that you produce. This attack that you take on Zach Baggins. Isn't Zach Baggins involved in the same type of things that interest you? The supernatural, the paranormal? Isn't he doing the same thing you're doing with your book? Your book is, as you know, Charlie was interested in what I thought about your book. Me. He asked me, what do you think about Shrek's book? He said had too many big words in it for him. He liked to say that he had a third grade education. But I'm going to reveal something Shrek, and everybody else in the Manson circles know, but the general public doesn't know, which is Charlie was extremely prolific. He may not have wrote a book like Spiro said in this show. He said, which was pretty cool. I really don't like Spiro's background, and I don't like that he was there, but it's not my choice that he was there. He was invited by Jason, who had the who had the right to choose. And what a fiasco it turned into. Well, Spiro said that Charlie never wrote a book. He never pleaded to Christ and became a born-again Christian and tried to get out. He was a man's man. I'm paraphrasing Spiro, but he's correct. There really was something special about the fact that he wouldn't do those things that are normal, like the normal run around, like Tex did, like Sadie did. They each wrote their Christian books. They each made their dime off their crime. They made their dime. Maybe not, maybe so. But it's obvious. If you listen to the video, you can tell that there's a lot of distaste from Shrek and Spiro. That it's almost like you got a problem with Christ-like people. If someone follows Christ, the tantric in you sees them as lesser. I don't know, but your tantric Buddhism sure doesn't seem very Buddhist. It assembled 3 people to make an attack on the rightful heir, legitimately the legal heir. I'll say myself that I believe Bruner was more entitled, while at the same time, Bruner didn't do what Jason did. He could have, and I really enjoyed listening to him on your show because it was a great answer to what was this guy's problem. Obviously, the parents that raised him were very against him ever having contact with his biological father, and he obviously, like Jason, he sought out somewhat during that. He says that winter when he had a lot of internet time, and he found out things he never knew before. And he reread his letter that was copied after it was ripped up. I mean, geez, what a massive amount of secrecy involving your own father. And so Jason did it. Jason achieved it. It was just as hard for him as it was for Michael Bruner. The only difference is Jason found a way. His will was strong enough to find a way, and that's where Baggins comes in. That's where your Tony Miller comes in. That's where your Spiro comes in. Your Tony Spiro. And yeah, he regrets. All of them do. Jason regrets what he got drawn into by the infamy of his grandfather. And Michael Bruner regrets what he has experienced.
All the big colleges that we've been building is taking people the other way. The smartest people in the world are really the most cut off. It's the common people, man. So
Around the minute mark, 9:18.
Hello, Moto. The new Moto G6 generation was designed for you, for the creative you. Because you know that the best things in life don't always cost more. The new Moto G6. Hello, you.
It's all in the eyes of a dreamer. It's all in the eyes of a
Around the minute mark, 9:18, Bruner granted his. Let's see if I can pull it up.
sun, and all the saints have been hung. The wars and cries have been wailed, and all the people have been jailed. The world.
First exclusive, in-depth interview with Michael Brunner, the son of Charlie and Mary Brunner, has ever granted. Black Wolf, one of Charlie's closest friends and frequent visitors for over a decade, released the authorized Manson music recordings, the vinyl EP Horsefly in 2011, and more recently, the cassette aka Abraxas. An ardent ecologist and advocate of Manson's Otwa Creed, Black Wolf co-facilitates the Otwar blog. He spoke to us from California about his final visits to the terminally ill Charlie at Corcoran State Prison's medical facility, his interactions with Jason Freeman, his attendance at the staged reality TV funeral of Charles, arranged by an entertainment production company for a film shoot, and the ongoing reverberations of that theatrical spectacle. Charles introduced me to Black Wolf slightly over 10 years ago on the ominous date of August 8th, 2008. Black Wolf, thank you for taking the time to share your experiences.
Can't find it. I'll have to redo this. For you guys watching or looking at some of this, I just have to redo it. Needs better production. Right? So the subject matter, though, it was a statement Brunner made about one of the reasons why he didn't attend the funeral when he was offered an invitation very late, I guess, and he probably wouldn't have been able to make it. But had he even been able to, he states he probably wouldn't have gone because he would expect that something bad would come of it, something bad would happen, like possibly what Tony Spiro was accused of, Brunner would have been accused of, which I'd like to say he most certainly would have been accused of, and he was accused of when he got involved in the matter. One of the things you guys left out of the whole show that is harping on TMZ, which I hate. I totally hate TMZ. And hate's a big word, big bad word. And I try not to use it very much, but the man made his bread and butter on Charlie. His interviews back, I believe, to the 70s with Michael Brunner is Harvey Levin. And it's the beginning of TMZ. It's how it began. So there's a lot of hypocrisy to that, to have a show in it that is crying about Jason doing this as if he did it. You guys think he did it, but you don't know yet. Nobody knows yet. But truth will come out. It'll come out in the wash. Let's see this at 15.
And he came right to me and he said, have you talked to Mary? And I knew who he was talking about, and it kind of hit me. And then he asked me what other members of the family that...
For those of our listeners who may not be completely as up to date with every name involved in the Manson saga, can you explain who Mary was?
I knew he was speaking of Mary Brunner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, and so from there, we told him who we had been in contact with, and I let him know that I had met with Kathy and visited with her, and it was great. And from there, we just settled down into the visit. And, in all these visits in medical, it was a lot different than the visits prior in PHU, where he and I would, we'd talk shit to, and it was very different. And I would kind of question him about some things from history and what was Mexico like and what was that wheel like. But and I don't know what that was, tripping on his own mortality or being vulnerable at all, I don't know. But
of course, that became an urgent matter shortly thereafter, what he wanted done with his physical remains and a will. So what was his physical condition? You said that you were sad to see him this way.
He could stand, and he would stand, you know. One time he got, actually every time except for the last time that